The last echoes of elven song faded into the wind, carrying with them the final whispers of an age long past. Middle-earth, once a land teeming with elven splendor, had grown quiet. The golden woods of Lothlorien stood empty, the halls of Rivendell abandoned, and the grey havens, where so many had taken their last steps upon mortal lands, lay silent. Yet, not all elves had vanished from the world. Some remained, bound by duty, sorrow, or the simple refusal to relinquish the land they had called home for countless ages. It was long believed that the final exodus of the elves occurred when the last great ship sailed from the grey havens, its white sails billowing under the westward winds, bearing the remnants of a fading race to the undying lands. The ship carried the last of the high elven lords, Certain the shipwright, the ancient guardian of the havens, Celeborn, the silver-haired lord of Lothlorien, and Thranduil, the proud and noble king of the woodland realm. They had delayed their journey for as long as possible, lingering in Middle-earth until the Fourth Age had settled. But at last, the call of the West proved irresistible. Their departure marked the end of an era. No longer would the great elven kings walk under Middle-earth's skies. The forests, once echoing with laughter and song, would now belong to men, dwarves, and creatures of the earth. Yet, despite the exodus, whispers persisted, there were still elves who had not left. Among the most well-known of the lingering elves was Legolas, son of Thranduil. A warrior, an adventurer, and a friend to men and dwarves alike, he had once sworn to remain at Aragorn's side. Yet when the great king of Gondor passed into the halls of his ancestors, Legolas finally yielded to the pull of the sea. He built a ship of his own, a vessel crafted with his own hands, and set sail into the west. With him went Gimli the dwarf, an unprecedented departure that marked a rare and deep friendship between two kindreds long divided. But what of the others? Could all elves truly have left Middle-earth? The answer was more complex than history often tells. Far from the grey havens, hidden in the depths of ancient forests and mountains, there were those who had chosen a different fate. They were the Avari, the unwilling, elves who had refused the call to Valinor in the First Age and who had remained in Middle-earth ever since. These elves, secretive and fading, had no wish to journey across the sea. They had never seen the two trees, never set foot in the lands of the gods. To them, Middle-earth was the only home they had ever known. And so, they remained, their presence little more than a whisper on the wind. In Erin Losgalen, the former Mirkwood, some of Thranduil's people had stayed behind. The deep roots of their forest bound them to the land. Their magic, once potent and strong, had begun to wane, but they clung to what was left, guardians of a world that no longer remembered them. The elves of Ithilien, led by Legolas in the days of Aragorn's reign, had also made a home for themselves in the lands once tainted by Sauron's shadow. Though many eventually sailed west, some chose to remain, perhaps out of duty, perhaps out of love for the lands they had restored. Their numbers dwindled, their presence becoming more legend than reality, until at last, they were no more than ghosts of the past. To remain in Middle-earth was not without consequence. The elves who lingered risked something far worse than mortality, they risked fading. Without the power of the Vala to sustain them, their spirits would slowly diminish. Galadriel had once warned of this fate, speaking of how those who remained would become nothing more than shadows, fading into obscurity, forgotten by men and even by time itself. Yet, some accepted this fate willingly. They were not warriors, not kings, but wanderers and dreamers, content to watch the world change around them. Perhaps they believed that in staying, they could hold on to the last remnants of what once was. No one knows precisely when the final elf of Middle-earth took their last breath. Perhaps it was an ancient Avari who had hidden in the mountains, his kin long gone, waiting for a world that no longer remembered him. Perhaps it was one of Legolas' followers, watching the stars from Ithilien until even the starlight no longer called to him. Or perhaps, in some forgotten glade, a lone figure still lingers, silent as the trees, a last guardian of an age-long past. The story of the elves does not end with a grand departure or a final farewell. Instead, it fades, like a song whose last notes linger in the air before vanishing into the wind. The elves are gone, but their memory remains, etched in the ruins they left behind, in the stories men still tell, and in the whisper of the trees, where perhaps, just perhaps, their spirits still dwell. Even in the days of men's dominion, strange tales persisted, of figures glimpsed in the twilight, of voices singing in the deep forests where no man dared to tread. In the Blue Mountains, it was said that an elven craftsman still labored at his forge, shaping weapons and jewelry of unmatched beauty, waiting for a time that would never come. In the ruins of Eregion, where Celebrimber's people once wrought the rings of power, travelers whispered of ghostly figures moving among the broken stones, as if seeking to reclaim what was lost. Could it be that the last of the elves still wandered these ancient places, unwilling to abandon them even as time itself passed them by? Some believed that the elves who remained had taken on a new role, not as rulers or warriors, but as silent protectors. The ancient groves of Middle-earth, the untouched places of wild beauty, were said to be guarded by unseen hands. Hunters spoke of arrows that struck down trespassers with uncanny precision, yet no archer was ever found. Lost travelers who strayed into the depths of Fangorn or the remnants of Lothlorien sometimes returned with stories of guiding voices and unseen companions. Perhaps the last elves had chosen to live not among men, but apart from them, watching over the fading remnants of their world. If so, they would be the final keepers of Middle-earth's oldest secrets, the last guardians of a past that even history had begun to forget. Though the elves have passed from the sight of men, their legacy endures. The cities they built, the knowledge they left behind, the beauty they wove into the very fabric of the world, all these things remain, echoes of a time when Middle-earth was young. And perhaps, in the deepest corners of the world, where the trees still whisper secrets to the wind, an elven heart yet beats, carrying the memory of all that once was, and all that will never be again.